Oh, happy Monday, everyone. Greg Dixon here with Shared Visions Unlimited. And my guest today is Judy Baker. And we're talking about getting podcast ready. And I guess we should preface this is you have a masterclass coming up, but it's for authors because your main business is with book coaches, book writers, authors, and that kind
Mhm.
of thing here. So there we
Yep.
go. They've got your thing.
Yep.
What is that? Your founder of Book Marketing Mentor. So
Yeah.
maybe before we get into this podcast thing, you should introduce yourself a bit.
Okay. Well, back in 2012, I was in a group and I was in a Vistage group. So it was a mastermind. And one of the other members was a retired FBI agent. And one of the other members in the group, these are both two Bills. So the other Bill was a cartoonist when he was in the Air Force and he wanted to produce a book. So we went off to a conference and I realized all of the authors in the room, because it was a self-publishing conference, weren't the most marketing savvy. So since 2012, I've been working with authors to help them get the word out about their books. And I'm an author too. So I know just exactly how we kind of sneak in our own room. So that's me. And I have to say, Greg and I share an affinity of backyard chicken raising, and I have a flock of 7 chickens right now.
Yeah, the chickens. And also, I think since you're in Sonoma, we should invite people to go get a glass of wine while they're talking, listening to the broadcast, right? That would be a good thing.
Well, it would be a good thing. And as a veteran of two, I worked at Robert Mondavi and at Sutter Home. So, two tiny wineries.
Okay, there we go.
Yeah.
And it's always a good thing. I had I'm not really drinking much anymore, and I know most of my friends are in some kind of 12-step program, and we're looking at creating a non-alcoholic liquor store, right? An unliquor store, but a lot of people enjoy it. You enjoy the flavors, you enjoy trying craft beers, kind of things, and so it's kind of like the cocktails without the consequences. But
That would be a great name.
yeah,
That would be a great name for a gathering spot, I think.
yeah. So we're
Yeah.
we're pursuing some space around here. Probably won't happen, but that's an idea. But it's just it's kind of fun because you go in and try. I'll go. There's a little place here called the Empty Keg, and they make their own beer, right? I'll get a flight, so you try
Oh,
4 different kinds, and have some food with it. It's kind of fun, and
yeah.
so we would try to reproduce that for people who are not drinking alcohol anymore.
I have a thought for you. If
Okay.
you if you're really serious about that, because well, I made wine when I was working at Mondavi. I learned how to do that because I never drank very much, and even we still have. I still have. I think I've still got 3 bottles of Opus One in our wine cellar, so to speak. But because of the idea of flights, what if you did it with tea and coffee? Because you could do that,
Yeah.
and they don't really do that at any of the places that I know of that sell coffee and tea. And there are so many nuances, and I would love it because yeah, I do the same thing. If I am having beer, I love doing a flight
Yeah.
because I like to taste the different choices. Ooh, good idea.
And I know a place that combines beer and coffee.
You do?
Yeah, it's in Prague. There was a place there, and they had various combinations of beer and coffee, and they had various kinds. And they did a thing called the Black and Tan, and they have like a dark beer that
Yeah, yeah,
was
yeah.
lower, and the light beer sits on top. So you got kind of thing, and then it all ends up in the same place. But it was fun. It was fun stuff to do.
Oh, that is. Well, when my husband was baking bread back 100 years ago, um, one of one of our favorite breads. Oh, yeah. Okay, so I should be in a 12-step program for bread because I have to abstain. Otherwise, I will be as big as I used to be.
Sure.
But this one bread, it was chocolate cherry stout bread. And so we,
Okay.
oh my gosh, this, and it had, so it had chocolate, it had, nice, sweet, unsweetened sweet cherries in it. And it was, a rustic bread. It was, I mean, seriously, I could just inhale it. I
Yep.
would smell it and I'd want to eat it before it was coming out of the oven. So yeah. Oh,
Okay.
that would just be, yeah, I can tease people all day with recipes too, because I do recipe hacking.
Awesome. So you've met my wife Bonnie,
Yes, I
right?
have.
And she at one time wanted to open a shop with her sister called Bonnie's Buns. And we actually registered the domain name the Chocolate Whisperers because we have toured around, interviewed chocolatiers across North America, and we should have stuck with it really because it was a lot of fun.
Oh, and Sonoma Chocolates, the woman who started that, it's right near me. I mean, now she's not right near me. She now has a big production facility. Her chocolate is incomparable. It is so good.
Yeah,
And then Scharfenberger, he was a winemaker before he was a chocolatier.
sure, yes. And wine and chocolate go together well too.
Mr. Mondavi taught me very, very well.
Yeah. So you mentioned chickens, and your other common thing is about um, gardening and food and vegetables and things like that. And so I've been involved with a couple of what they call slow food cycle tours. Basically, you go to Gary and you get on your bike and you ride for 5 minutes and stop and eat something or drink something. One of the places up by Pemberton had a distillery on the way. You stopped for, right? They made really interesting
Yeah.
gins and things, pretty specialty stuff. But and I have been down in wine country in California. I've gone on some wine tours too, and in parts of British Columbia that have some wine
Yes.
areas. Yeah, there it's a fun thing to do.
It's
Yeah,
a wonderful thing to do. And the thing is, this is something that when Mr. Mondavi introduced pairing wine and food, okay, he was good friends with Julia Child. And in fact, if any of you have seen the recent series that is portraying Julia when she was just getting started
okay, yeah,
on public television, well, we oh God, we have yeah. Okay, so I'm confessing on camera. I have a problem. I collect books. And I used to cook all the time, and my husband now does all the cooking, but we have a lot of cookbooks. Anyway, so we're watching the series, and I said, "Well, I know we've got the Art of French cooking." So I went and grabbed it out of the rack, and then I went, I had forgotten she had signed the book. She and Paul had signed the
okay,
second. And I'm sitting there going, I what? Because I met her, and this is before they had created Copia in Napa. And so Mr. Mondavi said, part of the reason there was such a bad connotation with drinking wine is because people thought about Thunderbird in a paper bag, and he said no, it's well, people in the United States and people were not very educated about this, and so that was part of their mission, was to not only help them understand that wine is an accompaniment to food, but the whole idea of food pairing. And that's kind of what Julia did with
yeah,
cooking. She made it accessible, and they both made it accessible, not snooty patooty.
yeah,
Although, you can have real expensive wine, but it's more about what's pleasing to your palate. I mean, the same thing with books. I think about books as, what do you like? And what is your audience like? Not that everybody's going to like everything. We
yeah,
all have our preferences. And
for
so
sure.
why, go
Yeah,
with it.
yeah. There's you're talking about all of humanity. So, no matter how
Yeah.
quirky your interests are, if you write a book on it, there's going to be somebody else who's interested in that.
Well, exactly. And well, this is one of the first books that I worked on. It's called The Caregiver's Challenge.
Okay.
And the whole story behind this book is Marianne, Marianne Schacht, who lives in Santa Rosa. She was a referral from one of my friends, and she was her second husband became terminally ill. Now she had been counseling people about this. She's a marriage, and she's a social worker, so she's licensed to do that, and she's retired from that now. But at the time, what came up is all of the stuff even if you know the systems and how to do stuff, when it's you, it's a whole different ball game. And so she said, it would be really helpful to document this. This is after he passed away, but to document, what did I need to know? What kinds of checklists? What do I need to know
Yeah.
financially? What do I need to know medically? Because Greg, I know it's different in Canada, but in the United States, and I talked to Melody Owen about this just last
Okay.
week, and in the United States and many other places in the world, people think a power of attorney covers everything.
Yeah. Yeah.
Nope.
No.
Yeah, so that's part of what's in here, but also the kinds of things that you want to ask the person who is in the situation, who's having whatever it is, whether it's terminal or just a temporary disabling situation. You want to be sure you know what their wishes are, and you
Yeah.
also know how to take care of yourself. So I helped her. She's a brilliant writer, but I helped her with the marketing. I designed the book. I laid the book out. It was a really interesting process, and I'm so glad I did that, because then later my husband's father was diagnosed with Parkinson's disease.
Sure.
And so we were in, not that you want to be prepared, but
Yeah.
it's good to be
But
prepared.
well, it actually is good. I just, from in Canada, their main things is a will. There's power of attorney, and then we generally have a representation agreement, basically to cover medical things. There's different names for it, but basically those are the things, and to put it in place. Most people don't have any of those three, and it's
Yeah.
and it's problematic. I went through this with my mother. Fortunately, we had a 1 year grace period to get all that stuff in place before, otherwise,
Oh,
we, because she collapsed, and she didn't, she survived for a year, and she kind of went out of her way to make sure we got all this stuff in place. And then she also tried to um, clear up some myths we had about her life. So, yeah, because I have two older siblings and a younger sister, and like there's 11 years between us, right? So in a way, their view of our mother is completely different than my view, and there were things that I misunderstood. We all misunderstood about it, and she kind of wanted to clarify some of those things. That we got carried, we get wound up with stuff that wasn't true. you know, so
wow.
yeah.
That, I mean, I didn't know that about you, and that was also true in my family. And I can still remember this, and this is public knowledge now. It wasn't at the time. I was with my three sisters. No, two of them and my nephew, and we were having dinner together. I'd gone down to San Diego to visit, and all of a sudden, and one of my sisters said, "Well, our father was married before." I said, "Pardon me?" Now, mind you, I'm a grown-up person. My father's he had, been dead for quite a while. And I think it was right. I think it must have been right after my mother died. And I said, "What did you say?" And my nephew did the same thing. We said, What? And it turned out and I didn't know it. And the only reason that my older sisters knew about it is when my father, well, I am a cancer survivor. My father had the BRCA2 gene, which is hereditary, but we didn't know what it was at the time. But he, the only reason they knew this is because they had contacted
I see. Yeah.
our relatives, and and it slipped out from somebody else, and so they knew that. I didn't even know this. I didn't know this about my own father.
No. So
Gosh.
yeah. So in our family, by the time I was born, my parents were not talking to each other, right?
Oh,
So, it kind of disintegrated, and there's a long story with that. So,
yeah.
and anyway, they were kind of blessed is that neither said anything bad about each other, and it was a non-violent. It was, we in a way we had, a much better family situation than a lot. But there was some things. My father was quite a bit older than my mother. He was born in, I think, 1911, and somebody told me about, and I don't know if it was him or my mother, said that during the Depression he spent some time riding the rails. But
Oh.
nobody, none of my siblings, nobody else knows anything about this. So one time I think I might actually have to invent a story for him, just basic on that premise. Yeah. So
Well, one of my first clients when I was working
yeah,
with authors, Beth and I knew each other. We were both um, business coaches,
yes,
and her business at that point was called The Third Act. And then she decided she wanted to get out of that, and she started writing her family history. But like you, it turned out her grandparents, there were some big gaps. So, I mean, she had done a lot of research, but there were big gaps. So she fictionalized it. And the same thing. And it was very common during the late 1800s, early 1900s. People would go somewhere else, change their name, and suddenly they were somebody else. Well, they might have had a family where they came from, and now they invented this new person,
yeah,
and they would start the whole thing over again. And so that's what she did. So she fictionalized the story of her family. Her name is Bev Scott, and there were so many incredible themes in her book that resonated with women during the Depression, women having to take on the caregiving of their family and providing for them, and the fact that, people weren't always who they said they were. And I thought that was so, so amazing to me. And then I realized that's kind of, most of us have stories
yeah,
like that in our lives.
absolutely.
Yeah.
Yeah, so one of the things I like doing is story productions and getting to people to tell their stories, and it's just like one of the things is my father's parents came from Northern England a long time ago, and last name Dixon, and I was in England. I followed my second partner there, and I ended up working in the seed department at the Royal Horticultural Society Gardens in Wisley, and there was a guy named um, the manager there was a very quiet, sort of proper British person, and
Mm-hmm.
his last name was Dixon. And anyway, um, we completely, between a guy from Boston, an Irish woman, and us, and then a kind of a rambunctious person, we totally revamped his life. We had loud music, raunchy jokes. He just loved it completely. Anyway,
Oh,
but he said, like, there's some mysterious things about my grandfather. For one, is one of the family stories is, why did my grandparents come to Canada and leave their daughter at home for 8 years? So we don't really have an explanation. She went lived her whole life being bitter about that, and then So Howard says one day, and he says, well, my grandfather disappeared. We don't know where he went. We think he went to Australia to the Yukon Gold Rush. And I said, the Yukon Gold Rush was in Canada. Anyway, so I'm pretty sure he thought that it was quite possible that my grandfather and his grandfather were one and the same person.
Is that amazing? Wow.
Yeah.
Oh, wouldn't that be interesting to find out if that, I mean, now you could actually check that out and see if
Yeah.
that is the case. Well, yeah, and my parents, my father was born in what was known as Prussia.
Yeah.
Yeah, and then his family moved to the United States because they were getting persecuted and they got out before they all got, annihilated. And my mother's family, her father and mother came to the United States from Lithuania. Same reason, not identical Eastern European history, but both families, and they wound up in St. Paul, Minnesota.
Sure.
And I have a number of friends whose families immigrated from different places in Europe right before and during World War II, and they immigrated to Canada before they then later came to the United States, because it depended on who could take you at the time, just like it is now. And it's just, it's remarkable to think about people, and if you think even a couple generations before that, people didn't do that. You maybe walked to the next village, but you didn't move all across the world to be where you are. So I think, family histories are very interesting.
Yeah.
I can still remember, and I do have a copy of it someplace in here. One of my cousins did a paper version. This is before ancestry.com. For anybody who's under 50, before they used to do it all in paper. But he wrote out the family history as they knew it. And my father said they could trace his family history back to 14th century Spain. Yeah, the Jews were getting kicked out of you name the country, we got kicked out of it at some point or other. So they moved from Spain, which, gosh, all that yummy stuff, seafood and good stuff. And then they kept moving east till they didn't go any further. But it's just really crazy. And I like this idea about, and that's what I do too. When we talk about writing books, it's telling your story. And these are the kinds of stories that people resonate with. And even if that's not the story that's in your book, they want to know about you, not the other stuff. And then probably, if you are a good storyteller, you've incorporated some of those lessons, because I specialize in nonfiction. You've incorporated those not just in the memoir and self-help guides, but in the business books. You learned something valuable, just like I did. I learned that the way that I approached having a life-threatening illness, I didn't even realize I'd been doing it my whole life. And in fact, I wrote about it this morning. I was doing some editing, that this idea of, oh, here's a situation that I'm not really thrilled about. There's stuff I can control and there's stuff I can't. But I have learned over the years, including from the time when my father was sick, well, hey, you muscle it up. You figure out what you can do rather than looking at what's not working. You amp up the stuff that is working. And that resiliency is that power that sits right in here in your heart and in your gut and really can light you up. And that's my approach to marketing, is tell honest stories about what happened to you and how you helped people and how did you save someone's life. That's it.
No, that's it. It's fabulous. So I think what you and I have in common, many things we have in common, is one is the thing about
Well, we're
doing
gorgeous too, so,
well, yeah, that too. That goes without saying. Anyway, so the the beauty of doing the book, you never know who's going to walk in your door, right? So somebody comes in and they start asking for help with something. So I didn't even, what is that? I didn't know whether that was a thing. Why would it? Wow, so it's kind of an adventure. So you learn things as you learned about it, about that item. And I think you and I also have a very similar approach to marketing. And that's
Mhm.
why we're talking about podcasts today, really.
Yes.
So because like I know, I think you and I both have had people come in and they've maybe been laboring on their book for years, and then they come out and then they find, wow, we helped them get it up on Amazon or Ingram Spark or something, and then it says, whoo, I got that done, and then that's the last thing they ever do about it, right? And nobody other than their living parents and maybe a friend who is too polite to say no ever look at the thing. But even though maybe it's something absolutely fabulous and thousands or millions of people could have benefited from it, so it's almost a disservice to the book sometimes by not doing anything with it. So
Oh gosh, yes. Well, I mean, don't think about it. I mean, you can see there's a stack of books
yeah,
behind me. I'm not pretending here. There's books that, well, they're books that are meaningful to me, and they're
yeah,
books I've worked on. And if you think about it this way, how many books were that are really important to you were written 2 seconds ago? And how many of them 20, 30, 1,000, 2,000 years ago,
yeah,
they still have value and meaning. And if you don't keep sharing that these books exist, I mean, the pile of new books, well, you depends on where you look for the numbers, but it's on about the scale of 2 to 4 million new books every year.
yeah,
And now, yes, and that has now even gotten a bigger number, because we've got some assisted writing technologies. But I'll show you one book that really, really made a difference. It was this one, The 7 Habits of Highly Effective People. And hey, let me tell you what year this came out. I think it's 30 years ago, to be honest. And yeah, I have to get through all the testimonials at the front of it first.
yeah,
No, I'm serious. This was published in 1989. 89, mind you.
yeah.
Now, I will venture to say probably every one of you has a copy of this in your library.
I do.
If if you're a business person, you've got this book, and it dramatically changed my life.
Yeah.
And
No. Yeah.
yeah, you,
Very good.
you need to keep sharing it. And podcasts, oh, wow. Well,
Actually, before we get to the podcast, the other
okay.
thing that you and I talked about the other day is that we have a very liberal interpretation of what it means to publish a book. Like in terms, there's the printed book, the ebook, it could be an audio book, could be something you could publish things serially like they did in the 19th century with, you know, Dostoevsky and Charles Dickens, and people would put something out in the local publication once a week, right? And we
Oh,
also talked about how they were basically had the gun of poverty at their head to crank it out every week so they could buy food. But
they did, and now there's even. I mean, those were just four things that you
yeah,
mentioned.
yeah,
I
yeah,
I always approach it like, well, you wrote a business book. Did you create a workbook to go with it? Did you create a yeah? I mean, we would be here till next Tuesday if
yeah.
I if
And my, I spend a lot of time with online courses and memberships. So if somebody comes in with a book, I'm always going to say, "Wow, let's create a course or a membership to go with that." Anyway, well,
yeah,
I with this podcast thing, doing broadcasts like this for a long time. I've got hundreds of them out, and I get up. I probably do 3 or 4 things a week, and then I recently started a podcast because this thing here is I think this is a streaming video, right? But the
Yeah,
word started says, well, oh, you're doing a podcast. And I says, no, I'm not really doing a podcast in the traditional way. And,
yeah,
because the podcast is audio, because it's different, because the podcast goes out to, you know, say Apple Podcasts or Spotify or
mhm,
iHeartRadio. It's a different thing. So I
mhm.
recently started a podcast where this will end up as a podcast. I'll go edit it, take the audio, and then I'll push it out as a podcast. And I think that's what you're going to talk about
It
by
it is.
coincidence.
It is. I mean, who knew? Who knew?
Who knew? Yes.
Well, the first podcast I was ever on was in 2012. That's 12 years ago, and it was at the San Francisco Writers Conference. And Peter Goodman interviewed me. At that time, I was president of the Bay Area Independent Publishing Association. And he said, "Oh, we're doing this new thing for IBPA. For Independent Book Publishers Association, because they were the host of the conference." And he said, "Would you like to be on the show?" And I said, "Well, you all know, if someone asks you if you want to be on the show, on a stage to speak, the answer is yes, and." So I said, "Of course." And so I still have the recording, and it was marvelous because that still exists. So there's this episode of me 12 years ago when I was a baby in working with authors. But I had at that point, how many years of branding and marketing experience. So podcasting, if you'll think about it, it's like your book, that it exists as long as you want it to exist. People might find the episode today, like we're live streaming right now, or they might listen to it in 2 weeks, in 2 years, 2 months. You don't know. With authors who are nonfiction authors, especially, your content is evergreen. Podcasts are evergreen. Video can be evergreen. So you have an opportunity to create a body of work that can help people and inspire them add out into infinity. So that's the beauty of podcasting.
Yeah, it's the beauty of all the media, really. YouTube videos, blog posts, social media posts, and people may not be watching us live now, but
Mm.
maybe in a week or so they find, holy smokes, and somewhere somebody's going to come across Shakespeare's The Tempest and say, wow, this is amazing. Where's it been all my life?
Exactly. And we all build on things that we have seen and heard and observed. And with getting podcasts ready, what impresses now, I have a theater degree. And the
Okay.
reason I have a theater degree is because I was painfully shy as a
Yes.
kid. I mean, oh boy, hide in the closet, didn't want to talk to anybody if I didn't know them. And I realized that, well, I dreamed of being famous. That was one part of it. But the other part of it was this idea that if I always clammed up and if people couldn't hear me, how was I going to communicate with them? How was I going to make a human connection? And with podcasting and getting podcast ready, that's really the essence of it. I'm doing this masterclass with my friend Brett Ridgway, who has 25 years in the speaking industry. He's also had over 100 episodes of his own show, which is Spotlight on Speaking. And so Brett and I said, well, what do people need to know? And what did we stumble around with when we started? And it's this, there's so much. Where do you start? Well, we want to keep it simple. It's how to be attractive to a podcast, to a potential podcast host, finding the right shows that resonate with not only the host's audience, but with your audience. And then how do you leverage each and every appearance? And as Greg was saying, well, yeah, we don't know when someone's going to find our podcast, our book, our course, our membership, and making that so clear how, in fact, I was on two shows, one that was live last week and one that the recording went live last week. And I have broadcast out in a number of different ways to people I think would be interested in those episodes. And I'm going to do it again and other times. And you know what? It's You're doing people a service. You're not doing them a disservice.
Yeah.
And in fact, if you don't share it, that's when things get not so hot. Yeah.
Yeah, I think I subscribe to something. Marie Forleo would say, says you have, the world needs that special gift that only you have, and the
Yeah.
more places you can get it out. And the thing with like now, like for people searching for something, if you're on a podcast, you're on YouTube, you've got a LinkedIn profile, you've got a blog post, you show up, and then people say, "Oh, maybe there's something there for me," right? And I'm gonna just put up the right now. I'm gonna put up the sign up page, the cute page. What do you call it? Kind of
It's our landing page, and you
landing.
can register on it too.
Yeah. There you read, and there's a little bit about Brett and a little bit about you, and
Oh, I'm
what you're
loving it.
what you're going to get out of it, and then the registration form. So
Yeah, right there.
right there. So there, and I put the link in the chat,
Yep.
and
No calories. Valentine's Day, no calories. You won't regret.
no calories. There we go. Yes.
No
No,
gluten. Don't have to worry about allergies either.
yeah, gluten free podcast. There we go. So
Exactly.
you're talking about breads. I can't help myself now. We're gonna digress here.
We
Yeah. So Bonnie's has her family's down in Los Angeles area region, Burbank and there. And anyway, she went down, spent 3 months there with her family, and I stayed in Merritt here. And
Yeah.
Bonnie goes, there's a local First Nations bakery called Kukuli, and Bonnie was making bannock there on Saturdays. So she still does. Like she gets up at
Oh,
she was getting up at 4 or 5. Now it's a little bit later, but she goes in and makes bannock. And
yeah.
so my habit is I'd do a bunch of stuff in the morning. I'd go over there and I'd get a bannock. I don't know if you know what a bannock is. It's like a big donut, really, with
Yeah.
various toppings.
Yeah.
You can either be fried or baked, and it came from Scotland originally, but the First Nations adopted it, and it's bannock or fried, and the motto of this place is "Don't panic, we got bannock." And anyway, so I was going there and I was doing, and she thought that oh, Greg's going to gain 10 pounds because he's going over there and eating bannock. Anyway, I actually lost some weight, and so I did a little mock broadcast, right? And I says how to lose weight, with coffee and bannock. And I did a little shot in there, and I did things like I showed, says here it is. It's basically on a scoreboard. It's a bannock with icing and crumpled up score bars on it, right? And
Oh my goodness.
and I
Yes.
made a point of making sure the coffee I had to make sure it had sugar and milk in it, but I had a little streaming on the bottom warning may lead to
Oh,
some
that's
other health issues, not necessarily recommended, but
that is really, really funny. I know. Yeah. Well, isn't that part of the reason that, well, I pick out the seeds. I'm confessing to that too. I'm not a real big get my hands dirty and all that. But I do that occasionally because I actually like being outside. And we live on a creek.
Yep.
Right behind us is a creek. So there's always all kinds of birds and critters and things. And well, you already know this. We got a bobcat.
Yes.
Yeah, adopted our yard, and we didn't know it right away. And we kept going, why are the chickens disappearing? And it
Missing
took, yeah, it took a minute. And, we actually tracked this, but we love having fresh produce in the garden. I've got a beautiful view. I've got
Yeah.
my chickens that are cracking me up all the time. They are very funny. I've got one of the new chickens. She had her comb, and it's not just roosters that have a comb, but she has a comb that goes like this, so it looks like a little hat. So we call her Flopsy because she's beautiful, kind of a light lemony yellow, and then she has this pink comb. So Flopsy is the noisiest of all the birds in there.
Yes.
And so they're always carrying on and doing goofy things. And anyways, the bobcat adopted our yard, and when we finally figured it out, we moved the chicken coop over, but my husband didn't quite listen to everything I said. And so he insisted, oh no, the it's all buttoned up. Bobcat can't get in here. Well, we found out later that yes, they can. If you don't have rigid mesh, not mesh, but actually there's hog wire and there's chicken wire, but there's also this gardening cloth that you can put over. Well, if it's bouncy, the bobcat can get in it. Well, the bobcat got in the brand new chicken coop, had not only gotten under the wire, but got in the pen, had bonked, because they're strong, had bonked the door, which had a positive latch on it, both of them. The chickens were running around in the yard, but I saw them and I rescued the chickens. And now the bobcat hasn't been coming around for lunch. Maybe comes by when we're not looking, but can't get in. So the chickens are totally, they have their own little protection, and they can be outside, but they aren't they're not being food for the bobcat.
No, that's good. I think I mentioned my sister has the same problem up in Haida Gwaii, and she has what they call a chicken tractor, right? They have ravens there. The ravens are like, and they're just hanging out. They're just waiting for somebody to make a misstep. So,
that's what they do, and we've lived here for a good long time, and this is a repair. It's called a riparian pathway. So, we're used to critters, but we didn't have the bobcat happening before. We had other things that fox can also get in there. But so now the chickens are all happy and they're safe. And I can't convince Gary that the chicken tractor, he wants to do something different. I said, no, honey, we can just get one and you don't have to. Well, the thing is, we keep finding them, but they have the whole thing built on there, and we just need the things so they can go outside for a little bit, and then they'll go in their pen.
I think you were talking about something like a dog run.
I think so.
Like you just have let them run wild for a little bit, or think they're running wild.
Well, because we've got lots of goodies for them. One of the most prolific podcasts started as, I think, the Backyard Chickens. People were just sharing ideas, and then people said, well, where did you get that? And where did you get this? Well, the same thing happens when you share about your book. If you understand how to do your stories properly, if you understand how to let people get to know you, then if they think you're hysterically funny, or they think you're really witty or smart, or you can solve a problem, people are running out to get your book. And I don't think I've purchased a book probably in the last 4 years, other than the authors who are in. I'm president now of Redwood Writers, which is a chapter of the California Writers Club. And I purchased books from the authors who are part of our group. but otherwise it's all been through podcasting. I
Yeah.
hear I hear the interview and I'm going, I want that book.
You
That
want
book's
that book. Yeah.
or that book's going to be fun to read. It is really, really, truly for being one of the for one of the ways to market yourself without marketing yourself.
Yes. Yeah.
Podcast, it is.
Yeah.
Yeah, it
Yep.
is by and large one of the best ways to do it. And once you get clear about how to do it, it gets to be fun. And we're going to
And
show you how to do it.
yeah, fun and it's easy to do. I should mention that I'm an honorary member of Cluck. It's the
What is
Canadian Liberated Urban Chicken Club with the Canada and K's on both ends because
that?
because we had some friends who wanted we were involved with urban farming in North Vancouver,
Right.
and some friends wanted to lobby to get the bylaws changed so they could have backyard chickens. So we went to two different municipalities. We showed up,
Yeah.
we get a place to talk at the city council meetings, and then do the and we actually were able to get chickens in the city where we were living, and our friend who wanted the chicken coop, she would sneak in her yard and drop off eggs while we weren't looking. I don't know how she got by because she had to go by the big front windows, but she was
Yeah.
able to, sort of random acts of chickening or something like that. I don't know. So we'd have these fresh
Goodness.
eggs dropped off on our steps, but it was fun.
That is crazy. Well, I'm not the only, and I'm gonna and I mentioned this to you too. I'm not the only author who raises chickens. And one of the members of another chapter of the California Writers Club also does chickens, and she does live in an urban environment. I'm in a semi-rural area, and Jerry and her husband they've got a flock of 10 chickens, and most of the urban guidelines say you can only have usually 5 chickens.
Okay. Yeah.
But because they're on an acre and a half, they have the space, and like us, they've got the whole thing protected so that critters can't eat the chickens. And so they now teach other people how to set up their backyard chickens and do all the right things. And she's working, I think, on her 4th book. So yeah, chickens can be very well, they're brain food. So the eggs we're not eating the chickens, we're eating the
Yeah.
eggs. Sorry.
So I'm still in pretty good still friends with my first wife, and she and her current husband were in Ottawa, and I ended up staying at her place and in theory to look after the chickens while they were off for 6 weeks or something. By the time I got there, they had found another place for the chickens, so I just sort of hung out in Ontario, But I got to we had I've got my son and his family were in Montreal, so I go visit there, and I had friends in Toronto. So and the Ottawa area is there's a lot of nice, pretty areas around there, and I'd met some guy in Florida, and he liked dancing and going to bars, so it was great.
Oh my goodness. Yeah. Well, there are so many people near us who, well, my joke is you can't walk outside your door if you live in Sonoma and not run into somebody who writes,
Yeah.
paints, sculpts, whatever. It's a beautiful place. And well, I live, for people around the world, they probably have heard of the Sonoma Mission Inn, which is about 5 blocks from my house. And they do the Sonoma Valley Authors Fest. I think this year is going to be the 4th year. And so I've gone to it. I've helped volunteer there, and I've met some of the most amazing people. I mean, I got to meet Eric Larson, he's very shy also, but boy, is he a nice man. And it's incredible to see these people who, well, Barney Garmus, who wrote Lessons in Chemistry. I got to meet her last year. And when she told the story behind why she wrote it, oh, every woman in the audience was, going, yeah, we know, mansplaining. That, and seriously, she was a copywriter for a very, very long time. And she
Yeah.
was in a meeting and she presented something, and then another man on her team restated what she had just done, and she was so pissed off.
Yeah.
She started writing a story, which became the story of
Yeah.
lesson chemistry. And I just love, you never know what's going to inspire you. And that's why when you share your stories on, auditory or,
Sure.
visually with people, they can go, oh, I can get it. I can relate to you. I want to know you. I want to talk to you. I want to find out more about who
Yeah.
you are and what you wrote about. Yeah.
No, it's perfect. The other fun thing about podcasts is because if you're having your own podcast or get invited to be on other podcasts, you meet a lot of interesting people, and
Oh,
you have conversations that obviously you've gotten over your shyness.
well, yeah. Well, still, I do have a little trouble when I'm in a crowd. I'm
Okay. Yeah.
fine one to one, but I just and this I got really clear about this. I had, because I've had my own business for a very long time. I would make myself go to networking events, and I hated doing it. Partly, both my parents were pretty introverted as well. Um, my mother a little less so than my father, but I realized when I was at a networking meeting, and Suzanne Rowan, who wrote How to Work a Room, was the speaker, and it was a luncheon. And what she did, it's a little hard to do when you're on a show like this, but it can still be done. She went around the room before she got up on the stage. And she saw people she knew, she saw people that she didn't know yet, but she would ask questions. And by the time it was her turn to go up, and she was the featured speaker, she had a connection. Either they'd lived somewhere in common, they had gone to the same school, they knew somebody else. There were all kinds of reasons why she didn't walk up there to a room full of strangers. And when you're on a podcast, you can do something similar. You can, like we're doing live streaming, you can invite comments. You can ask people to, follow up with you after you're on the show. You can let people know you've got a gift for them. All of these things. And so you make these connections and they can last forever. So I learned from her doing that, I didn't have to be afraid to talk to people. I just always thought small talk was like, ugh, awful. But no, what it really is saying, oh, I see you. I hear you. Tell me more about who you are, not about who I am,
Yeah.
but who are you?
I think most people a lot of people, even they want to be public speakers or get on a broadcast or something, they really end up being self-conscious because most people don't like the way their voice sounds or the way they look on camera, but
Mhm.
at some point they just have to say, it's not about me. I'm talking to somebody. I've got something I can share. you know it doesn't really matter what I sound like or look like, if and there's somebody out there needs to hear that, whatever it is I have to say. I'm gonna have I don't know if I told you, I used to drive for a driving service in Vancouver.
No,
So
no.
I've between I know pretty much. I'm once removed from almost everybody in the music industry and once removed from everybody in the film industry. And I would often ask what got people into acting. And it was interesting.
Yeah.
And one person who I'm not going to name her, but she said exactly what your story was. She was at the University of Los Angeles doing pre-med and architecture. If I ever got her in the car again, I was gonna ask her why those two, because but anyway, but
Yeah.
she thought she was really shy, so she took some acting courses to get her over her shyness, and she
Mhm.
caught the buzz, right? Now if she's there's a prominent series she's been on, almost any if I named her, everybody would know who she was. But
Curious. I'm gonna do some research because
yeah, yeah. I'll tell you offline, but and the other thing is, other people say, "Oh, you're lucky dog." And I didn't know what they're talking about because she was just sort of, I just knew her as a nice person. She's got a child, kind of blah blah blah. And talk with her, and then when I saw her show, I said, "Oh, okay, I see what they're talking about." So,
Well, you never know. Where we live, there's a lot of events that people come from all over the world because it's a beautiful location. It's a great place to live, but a lot of famous people have second or third homes here.
yeah.
And there's the Sonoma Valley International Film Festival, which I've also worked, with, and other things. And I can still remember stories. My husband, like you, he likes to drive. I'm not a big fan of driving cars, but he is. And so he volunteered, and he was chauffeuring all these, stars and directors and writers and things. And so he had Lauren Hutton was one of the people.
Yeah.
All she wanted to know is, where is the farmer's market? And
Oh
so
yeah,
he
for
took
sure.
her, he took her to the farmer's market, and they loaded up on stuff. She and her traveling companion, they loaded up on goodies. They were happier than clams. She was a sweetheart. Ernie Hudson, the same thing, really, really nice. Patricia Heaton, all of these people, they're bigger than, who knows what. And they're just nice human
Yeah,
beings.
no, 99.9, just really nice. I had a few people I would put on if you ask for a ride, I'm not available. Yeah, but very
Oh,
few.
I've
I,
got a couple of those too. And it happened when I worked at Mondavi as well.
yeah,
And but one or two people out of the hundreds, thousands of people that I've met over the years, pretty much I'm convinced that the nice people are going to inherit the planet. They're the
oh
nice
yeah,
people.
no,
You
for
could,
sure.
yeah.
The just if people are really difficult, they don't get work. Like they have to. Um, it can really get in the way of their career.
Well, and Brett tells these stories too because, like I said, he was in the speaking, he was in the digital marketing space before we had the big explosion of the internet. And he said the people that drive by, this is what he calls it. They show up 2 seconds before they're going to go on air, which unfortunately I did today too. But I was coming, but they show up, and especially if there's a panel or there's a conference or something, no, you get there early. You
Yeah,
make sure everything's working. You find out if there's anything anybody else needs, and you don't disappear the second you're done. I mean, that's
yeah,
like um, Diva 101, because it is a super small world, and word gets out. And if there's a choice between you, if you're the diva, and the person who can step in, if, say, which you've probably done it, I've done it, somebody got sick last minute, who can you call? Oh, I'm calling Greg. Oh, I'm calling Judy, because they're going to say yes.
yeah, yeah. They're going to
Yeah.
show up for sure.
Yeah. Yeah.
Yeah. So on the other end, like this one actress was kind of shy. On the other end, there's somebody, and her name's Lori, and I'm pretty sure you know who it would be. Anyway, my best gig was she was a regular on a production in the Vancouver area,
Yeah.
and my mission was to go pick up her mother and her aunt, take
Yeah.
them out to the set. And she said, "Wow, they're going to get bored after about an hour, so you can go for lunch with them." And anyway, so I went to lunch with them, and they spent all the time telling stories about her, right? Because she more or less, they says Yeah, from the time she was 2, she was always performing. She was always pretending she was on stage. She was always singing. That was just her. She was an outgoing
Hairbrush.
and yeah, airbrush. Like like it's not really surprising that she ended up doing what she was doing. And just yeah, yeah, she was the nicest person. We ended up getting a bunch of driving jobs, even though we weren't the official supplier. Like we were the vendor. She just liked us. So
Well, being nice, this is part of my philosophy on marketing too. If
yeah,
you're kind, if you're generous, that will go a lot farther than being, oh, I'm the expert and
yeah,
you don't know anything. Well, you know what? We're all behind somebody else. Everybody learns from everybody.
yeah,
Is
for
is
sure.
And if you're nice about it, great. If you can share something that helps somebody, that is awesome.
Yeah,
I would rather be that person than be worrying about, oh, I'm sorry, I can't be bothered with you because you're a little peanut. Everybody
yeah,
everybody starts out not knowing anything, or not necessarily having a big following. But the things that we can do to build our community and our relationships, those last forever if you want them to. Because as you and I both said, we figured out there are a few people we went, yeah, they're calling. I'm not here. I'm not answering the phone.
yeah,
And I don't want to be that person that someone says, if Judy's calling, I'm not going to talk to her. I want to be the
yeah,
one that they say, oh, I'm going to call her because she knows stuff and she'll tell me, even if it has nothing to do with what I do for a living. And I know you know a bunch of stuff that, now you've told me stuff about for raising chickens. Well, I wouldn't have known that, but
yeah.
that's going to stick in my head. Just as a little preview, it's these quirky little things about us that help us stand out. Those are perfect for sharing on a podcast.
No, they're perfect. And it's it's so much fun. You can just talk about wherever. Like here, this our conversation now. It says how many things have we talked about, right? And but it's still we're a living example of the fun of doing podcasting and getting out, and people will get to know you, get a sense, and it's just you're become. It's a personality thing. You become a real person. You've got a background. Everybody does. Even though I've got some really good areas of expertise. Many times my clients come in and they're doing things that I'd never even imagined. Yeah, like I learn sometimes more from my clients than I help them with, right? And some of it is just cheerleading, right? you know,
And being an accountability partner
and
can also
accountability.
that
And I
can really
think
help.
yeah, and I think the other thing, going back to the books and the podcasting,
Yes.
is many people who want to write a book, they don't there's many things they don't know about the editing process, the mechanics of getting it there, the marketing, all that stuff. So, if you've got somebody who's got a handle with it, like you do, about those different aspects, then you can take them through the book journey.
And it can be more fun. And
More
yeah,
fun.
yeah. And I mean, I know there's some parts of any business, and being an author is a business.
Yeah,
There can be some parts that you may not just go, ooh, I get up this morning and do that. Or you can reframe it to say, oh, I've got a business and it's about me and it's about my book. So now what can I do?
yeah,
Yeah, I can make phone calls. I can put stuff up. I can, work with other people to, support this whole activity. And I think it's so amazing that there are people that just get really tunnel vision, and all they do is broadcast about themselves. They don't
yeah,
think about, oh, could I share Greg's show and tell other people about it? Could I tell people that, oh, you need some help getting your book in shape and published? Greg can help you with that. But
yeah,
it's because of our relationship, not because we are we're the super brains of the world. We figured some stuff out, and we make it work and we make it doable. And people like working with us
Yeah.
because they're nice people. And I don't mean nice in the, pejorative. I mean it that we listen, because your business took shape because you listened to what people were asking for. Mine took shape because I listened to what people were asking for. And we stay, a step ahead. We ask other people, and that's what we do.
Yeah. Okay.
Yeah.
Yeah. Anyway, I've got somebody's just come to the door to talk to. But anyway, so come join the master class at booktomoneymaker.com/podcast. And
Um, and we'll put a little link in there. If you can't remember that, go to bit.ly/heart pod, and that will take you right to
yeah,
the
it
page. Easy.
I posted it in the comment, and it's in the show notes too. And they can track you down.
And yeah, I'm all over YouTube, LinkedIn, Facebook, Instagram. You'll find me. All you have to do is look for me, Judy
Yeah,
Baker, the book to
Judy
money
Baker.
coach.
There we go.
Thank
Awesome. Well,
you.
thank you very much for coming out. And we're going to have to come down and visit, and we're going to have to do a little bit of a book and bread and wine tour of your region.
Oh my goodness. Yep. And one of my clients does bicycle tours.
Yes,
Knows all
bicycle
the
tours.
riders. So yeah, we can
Yeah,
be healthy while we're doing this.
healthy and wealthy. There we go. Thank you.
Thank you, my dear. This has been a
Thank you.
delight.
All right.
Okay. Bye
Okay.
bye.
Bye.